Okay, let's talk about Republicanism in 1780. The members who assembled in 1787 are all agreed on some basic principles. All of them believed in government by consent. The 18th century understanding of government by consent was a constitutional monarchy was to be limited, and where the government, including the assemblies, were elected by the people. They all understood it to be a republic, which means some form of representative government without a hereditary executive. They all understood democracy as meaning either by town meeting style democracy or simply the direct voice of the people within the government. All of the members struggled with the government of King George III, and they all had a bad taste in their mouth for a monarchy. Many leaders, like Madison and Hamilton, continued to think theoretically about the form that most likely would ensure freedom and good government. All the leaders of that time discredited a mere democracy. By a mere democracy, it was meant that, as Aristotle taught, rule by the passionate, ignorant, dominated voice of the people. In other words, they all displeasured. All our founding fathers, all the leaders believed that a democracy would produce first injustice, then anarchy, and then, in the very last, finally, tyranny. All shades of opinion back in 1878 discredited monarchy and democracy. All of them publicly affirmed republicanism. The reason that our founding fathers scorned democracy was because a democracy, they opposed the democracy because in a democracy, the kind that Aristotle had in mind produced a picture of heedless, emotional, manipulated populace that would still be denegated by most modern democratic theorists. Republicanism was positioned in the middle between a monarchy and a mere democracy. There was great tension between unalienable rights and a majority rule. Republicanism became more moderate and more intricate. So they all believed that in order to prevent tyranny, they needed to check and balance the different branches of government. They all knew that they needed to restrain and refine the will of the majority in order to protect rights or a higher law. American republicanism protected sovereignty of the people. It also made government more complicated. Republicanism was opposed to traditional monarchical tyranny, but it was also hostile to mob rule. And its thought on balancing and refining devices that would also restrain the powers of rulers, encourage the better judgment of people, and enable the Union to defend itself in a dangerous world. As Edmund Burke said, to make government requires no great prudence. Settle the seat of power, teach obedience, and work, and the work is done. To give freedom is still more easy. It is not necessary to guide. It only requires to let go of the rein. But to form a free government that is to temper together work requires much thought, deep reflection, a sagacious, powerful, and combining mind. Madison's formulation in Federalist Paper number 51 also points out the same. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself, as much a need in a republic as in any other form of government. Point? Can you see what the Founding Fathers were talking about here? And how right now our government has run wild? To oblige a government to control itself is much more difficult in the United States than it was in Europe. We need to balance freedom by giving each of the distinct, separately derived orders of society a means of self-defense. The balance was enduring because the king and the nobility in Britain and the commoners were formally and permanently separate. But in the United States, without a hereditary monarch or nobility, and without politically powerful bishops or other privileged elements, formally distinct form of the people, how could a check and balance work? David Hume put it this way: was to try to build onto the mechanism of government itself enough variation on the elections, powers, terms of office, and complications of the functions to create separate interests and perspectives. Different, eventually derived from the people, different districts, different terms of office, different modes of election, and different definitions of authority would create balance of power. It was theorized would become further effective substitutes for the balance inherent in the lasting divisions within traditional societies. Could mere complications of government together with devices to refine the expression of majority will without departing fundamentally from the principle of consent protect basic rights both from potential tyrants within the government and popular passions? The intentions was to temper idealism with realism, substitute complexity for balance of order. The challenge offered wide scope for political theorists, as well as practical strategists as the time approached to revise the federal constitution.